Hello chums, Robert Ross again here, comedy historian with the second in this occasional series called Robert Ross's Comedy Heroes. And today I'm again joined by the delectable Miss Gemma Fanning.
Hello.
Hello. And do you want to explain who we're doing today and why?
Well, it's Mother's Day today.
Hooray! We love mothers.
And we thought we'd pay a nice tribute to Hattie Jacques.
Yeah, the mother hen of the Carry-Ons, and a wonderful sort of larger-than-life comedy actress. So where do you want to begin with young Hattie?
Well, I suppose the first thing, obviously, again, Carry On is the link.
Mm-hmm.
But I always forgot that she was in Sergeant.
She's in the very first Carry On film, Carry On Sergeant, actually, the medical officer. Yes, she is. I think people also forget that she was a big star on radio, and a lot of the people that were plucked into Carry On Sergeant with no idea on the producer Peter Rogers' part that it was going to be a series. Of course, it was a one-off army comedy, but she was very familiar to radio listeners in Hancock's Half Hour around that time, just prior to doing Carry On Sergeant. So she was working with Kenneth Williams a lot, and subsequently, of course, Sid James joined the Carry On team as well, and they all were in Hancock's Half Hour together. But she's there, a small little part, but fun with Kenneth Connor.
What sort of roles would she play? Because I feel predominantly through the Carry On, she was always playing the sort of matron type that we know and love her for.
Yeah.
Was that the same on radio?
She got a bit disheartened with comedy writers, even the greatest of the great, Ray Galton and Alan Simpson, who are my absolute heroes in terms of script writers who wrote Hancock's Half Hour. They admitted later they felt quite bad because they would write a lot of sort of fat jokes about Hattie, and Hancock and Sid would always sort of like rib her on the show for her size, and she got quite upset about that, but she took it. I mean, she was a brilliant actor and took the lines that were written. But she played Griselda Pugh in Hancock's Half Hour, and that was Hancock's secretary. And occasionally Sid would make fun of her. Often Sid would fall in love with her in the episodes and sort of chase her around the desk and stuff. So there was some fun. I must play some of the radio shows. I've got my iPad is chock full of radio comedy and sort of radio plays. But I purely by chance I have 44 of the Hancock's Half Hour radio shows, and that was the age that Tony was when he died. And I thought 44 was quite a nice number to have. So I've got, 22 hours of Tony Hancock on my iPad. But she wasn't in all of them. She only was in Series 4 and Series 5. She came in.
I always felt she played... She was very good with Sid James. Like, they bounced well off as a couple.
Fantastic, yeah. I mean, look at something like Carry On Loving. They just work so well together. Sydney and Sophie Bliss running the wedded Bliss agency. Yeah, there's a real sort of respect, I think, as well. They both admired each other's work, and I suppose they got typecast in a weird sort of way by the Carry-Ons, earlier than the Carry-Ons. But I think they enjoyed making those films, and they enjoyed each other's company. You can hear in the radio shows on Hancock's Half Hour some of the episodes. Like we're doing, if you listen to our Frankie Howard chat, we decided to leave in sort of bloopers and mistakes and me losing it. I thought we'd just have a warts and all chat and not edit these things down. But some of those Hancock's Half Hour recordings, you can hear Hancock and Sid sort of breaking up with laughter at something that Kenneth Williams is doing, for example. So there's the real joy there, and I think that comes across particularly in the Carry-Ons on screen when you look at them working together. Carry On Cabby, they worked beautifully together. That's sort of the kitchen sink drama as a comedy film. There's a real.
How many Carry-Ons was she in?
She was in 14 Carry-On films, and she did one episode of the Carry-On Laughing ATV series, and she did how many of the Christmas shows? She was in 2 of those, if memory serves. Yeah, the first one, 1969, and she came back for 1972's Carry On Stuffing. So she was quite prolific. I mean, she wasn't in all of them by any stretch of the imagination, but she certainly, left her mark And you mentioned, and again, during this situation we all find ourselves in, we've got to be proud of the National Health Service. And I mean, Hattie, they brought back a few years ago. They brought back the position of matron in hospitals, and Hattie is this gorgeous matron. And if you watch the arc of her matron through those films. In Carry On Nurse, she's quite severe and quite stern, and she sort of runs that hospital ward like a sort of a barrack room, really. And then she sort of gets warmer and warmer. Carry On Doctor and Carry On Camping, she's the same character, the same matron. There's that lovely in-joke in Carry On Camping where she's looking at Kenneth Williams and goes, I was working in a hospital, there was a surgeon looked exactly like you, and it's a reference back to Carry On Doctor, of course. So there's those little things. You know something for it. So yeah, you see, they would throw those jokes in just to let people realise this is just a bunch of films we're watching, and these are just actors having a laugh. They're fundamentally the same character from film to film. Sid James always said it's just me with different hats on. So after Carry On Camping, they did again Doctor, when she's slightly warmer again, and there's a lovely sort of romance, sexual sort of fusion with Sid. And then Carry On Matron, she's beautifully warm-hearted, and she's in love with Kenneth Williams, and yeah, she's such a warm personality. It just sort of radiates through the
It's
characters.
interesting you say about Kenneth Williams, because again, another person she played very well with on screen, and I think off screen, good friends.
They were great friends. Well, because Hattie, we said at the outset of this little chat that she was the mother hen. I mean, she would take under her wing people like Kenneth Williams at Christmas. And Joan Sims, who was always going through various heartbreaks and things, and Hattie was this lovely, warm character, and they just, I mean, you hear all these stories, and again, I'm not going to labour it, but they're all these tales of woe and bad money, bad payment on the carry-ons, but they got on. They were just friends, all of them, and like any work colleague, any friends, they fell out occasionally, but fundamentally they just got on and had a great joy making those carry-ons.
And I didn't realise for a long time that her husband was John Le Mesurier.
John Le Mesurier from Dad's Army, yeah, absolutely.
How did they meet? Do you know that?
Well,
story?
yeah, because they were all just working together. I mean, John was a friend of Tony Hancock's. I mean, they met, they married in the 1949, late 40s certainly, and they were together till 1965 when they divorced. Yeah, they were all part of that same gang of people like Clive Dunn, and well before they worked together on Dad's Army, John and Clive Dunn were sort of crisscrossing, doing radio plays and theatre, and Graham Stark and Peter Butterworth and all those people, Dick Henry, all the goons. They were all sort of pals that would just hang out really, late 40s, early 50s, lots of BBC radio, and that was a lovely sort of partnership, because Hattie was very, very feisty and very sort of exuberant, and John Le Mesurier was very sort of quiet and would happily listen to his jazz and smoke his wacky backy.
They're
and
not
things.
likely people.
Not
you would
at
have
all.
put together.
No. It worked somehow. It really did for that short time. Yeah. But yeah, and as I say, she was a very vivacious sort of character. But her career, again, way before the Carry On, she was part of the Players Theatre in London. And actually mentioning all the National Health Service and her playing the wonderful matron, during the war, she was part of the voluntary aid detachment. So during the Blitz in the early mid 40s, she was serving as a nurse. So actually sort of saw action properly.
I may have read somewhere, or you may have told me this. Was that where she got some inspiration for those characters? Do you think, or
I think so. I think she was always wanting to be an actor. She wanted to be a serious actor, really, and she got quite frustrated with all the comedy. She often said, "I want to play a really sort of juicy murderess or something," I think she just but like a lot of them, just liked. The sound of laughter, the sound of applause, and I suppose in a way, like a lot of comedians, like a lot of comedy performers, because she was a larger person, and because as a kid, people would probably pick on her. She would rather them laugh with her than at her, if that makes sense. You find a lot of comedians were bullied as school kids. But she was born Josephine Jacques. It wasn't Hattie Jacques. She was called Hattie again because of her larger physique. She was doing a minstrel show where she blacked up for this show in the about 1946, I think this was, so just after the war had finished. and an actress called Hattie McDaniels, who was in Gone with the Wind. She won Best Supporting Actress in 1939. And she was a larger figure as well, Hattie McDaniels. So when Hattie Jacques, Josephine Jacques as was, put the black makeup on, they said, "Oh, you look like Hattie McDaniels." So it stuck. So Hattie Jacques, and that was it. So there you go.
That's interesting. So, did you ever get to meet, I suppose not her, but any of her family members or?
Yeah, I met her son Robin a couple of times, and I met a lot of people who worked with her. And yeah, I mean, I just come off this Carry On cruise, and lucky to have at least two regular co-stars, Richard Callahan and Jackie Piper, on board, and they both said how lovely she was, and she would sort of hold court at the Pinewood restaurant, the Carry On table, and tell jokes and tell anecdotes, and yeah, she seemed just a genuinely nice person, I think, and I would love to have met her and got to know her. I mean, but don't forget, she's only 58 when she died, and she was very young. A lot of them were very young, and obviously,
how did she die?
Her heart, because
yeah,
her heart was too big, I think. But yeah.
And then the BBC did, I don't know, this may even be something like 10 years ago now. You all know the answer to this, but Ruth Jones did
yes.
a drama
yeah.
of her life.
Called Hattie, yeah. Based on a brilliant book by a good friend of mine, Andy Merriman. He wrote an amazing biography of Hattie, and it was the seed for that film. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because I mean, having grown up watching the Carry-Ons and having grown up listening to Hancock's Half Hour as repeats. I'm not that old, folks, but certainly, I was wallowing in those old comedies as a kid, and then you suddenly see them being sort of reproduced in a sort of BBC Four, dramatic film. It's quite intriguing, really, to see how they reproduce it all. But I thought Ruth Jones was terrific. Actually, it's a beautiful performance.
And of course, you can still see it. Is it on BBC iPlayer?
I'm not sure it's still on iPlayer yet, but if you haven't got it, I'll make a recommendation at the end again, just so you can watch for free and something you can buy. But if you haven't got it, it may be on iPlayer. Check it. But at the moment, I know the BBC are uploading all sorts of things, so that may be one of the things they bung up.
But I remember that show, and it made me go and watch it afterwards on YouTube. Was the "This Is Your Life" episode?
Yeah, that's interesting. That is on iPlayer, I think, so you can check that out. And that's interesting because John is on that. John and Misha is on that, and but they were sort of strange at that time. So there's lots of good acting going on because they were going through all sorts of problems, which I won't go into, but I'm sure if you've read the book and you've seen the play. But yeah, that's a fascinating thing. It's funny seeing This Is Your Life when you're seeing performers known for comedy when they've almost got to keep up that momentum of humour and they're struggling inside sometimes. I'm a great admirer of performers that can sort of hide the tears behind the grease paint, really.
What was her last performance? Do you know?
Let me think. She was doing all sorts of things. Doing adverts at the end of her life, and her last Carry On was certainly the Orgy and Bess, which was the Carry On Laughing. That was her very last Carry On, written by Dick Vosper and Barry Cryer, who I just been on the phone to, and it's his birthday tomorrow. So I'm sure we'll mention Barry tomorrow at some point. These aren't time sensitive, these shows, but this is. I'm just letting you know this is recorded, as you say, on Mothering Sunday. It's already the 22nd of March, 2020. So that was her last Carry On contribution. But she popped up. I mean, of course, she was doing Sykes. Now we've got to mention Eric Sykes, that partnership,
of course,
because in the 60s they did a series for the BBC. And Eric Sykes, genius writer that he was, he loved working with Hattie. And they weren't just they were twins. They weren't married, because that was the whole thing. Even in the early 60s, the whole concept of a married sitcom was a little bit sort of passé and a bit done to death, really. So he wanted them to be brother and sister, but they were twins. They weren't just twins; they were identical twins. Now you see Hattie Jacques. No, they're not, right. But it's the beauty of it, and the writing is so good. And because they did about 7 or 8 years seasons of it in the 60s, very very successfully. And then Eric was hit by a particularly big tax bill and had to sort of resurrect something he knew was going to be successful. So he phoned Hat and said, do you want to do some more? And they did a whole load, I think, from 1972 until 1979. So the last episodes were going out around about October 79. So just under a year before Hattie died. So that was one of her last sort of successes.
Do you know? I don't think I've ever seen those.
You're in for a treat. This is what this lockdown is. The blessing of this lockdown is I can force you or willingly let you watch these old comedies because I've got them all here. So,
was there ever a role that I know you mentioned she wanted to be a serious actress. Was it ever recorded that there was something she would really want to do or turn down, maybe?
She wouldn't have turned it down, but I know there was a thing that I loved that she did that she was very proud of. It wasn't a serious part, but it was a comedy part of substance, and she played Madame Arcati in Noel Coward's Blithe Spirit on television, a series called A Choice of Coward, and she was cast as Madame Arcati, the not bogus spiritualist and medium. It's a beautiful part. A new film just coming out. It's probably been suspended or held back because of all this business. But Judi Dench is just playing that same character on the screen. And in the West End, just before all the theatres went dark, Jennifer Saunders is playing Madame Arcati. It's a brilliant part. I mean, the classic 1945 film, Margaret Rutherford plays it. And this was the 60s that Hattie played it on telly, and she's terrific. So that's a real rarity. That's out there on DVD.
Would you say she's probably one of the early female comedians of our times?
There were lots of sort of variety and musical people. I think it's always been a struggle for women to get into comedy, and as I say, I think she took those roles which she wasn't particularly happy about, playing the sort of jokes about her size and stuff. But yeah, I think she was a role model in terms of she had a real essence of stand-up comedy about her, Hattie. Sometimes there's an earlier radio show for people of a certain generation called ITMA, ITMA, It's That Man Again, which was a sort of during the Second World War was a huge thing, starring a Liverpudlian comic called Tommy Hanley, and Hat joined that for the last couple of years. It ended in 1949 with Tommy Hanley's death, and Hattie was in it from 1947, I think. And she was playing characters sort of about her size. She did this sort of this overweight. This is radio, of course, but overweight sort of schoolgirl who ate all the time, and called Sophie Tuckshop, named after Sophie Tucker, the jazz and blues singer. But Sophie Tuckshop was Hattie's part. And then she worked with Tony Hancock for the first time in a radio show called Educating Archie. Now, we were talking about Peter Brough this time last week when I did my very last show before this all kicked off really big time at the Museum of Comedy. Peter Brough, who was a ventriloquist on the radio. That's how, because you couldn't see his lips move, and he was actually very good apparently on the halls. And Hattie did quite a lot of stage shows with him as well. But Education Archie, Peter Brough was Peter, Mr. Brough, and Archie Andrews was the dummy, and Hancock was the tutor, and Hattie came in to play a character called Agatha Dinglebody. I know, right? It's all these crazy names, very much like Carry On names, really. So she had this really good career. I think people forget how prolific she was.
Have you ever thought of maybe writing a book on the Carry On women?
That's a lovely idea. Yeah, why not? I mean, I think they're vitally important, and I mean, and unlike a lot, I mean, I love all those comedies. I mean, I'm gonna mention some things I love here, but things like the Monty Python team, where Carol Cleveland, bless her, was given fairly sort of restrictive parts because my dear pal Terry Jones would play all the women, really sort of like the Pepper Potts and things. But I think the Carry-Ons, for all their sort of faults and for all their sort of, you can look back on them and think, oh, they're quite misogynistic and they're quite homophobic sometimes or whenever. Occasionally they are. Not really, but occasionally they are. But they gave, women, they gave those great comedy actresses some terrific meaty roles. I mean, Hattie and Joan Sims and Liz Fraser and all those. They had some really good stuff to do in those. So, why not?
There we go. That's a new idea.
That's a new book. Well, I've got some time on my hands now, right? So I've got time to write it.
So what should we go away then and watch? What's your recommendation for today?
Right, okay. So let me think. So look, we're Sunday afternoon, right? So I mentioned Hancock's Half Hour. So the free to enjoy thing, I'll get Gemma to put up a link. This is on YouTube, but please put some money in the hands of the BBC, because all the surviving original Hancock's Half Hours are available on CD, so you can buy the BBC collection of Hancock's Half Hour, the complete. But we'll get a free link to Sunday Afternoon at Home, which is just a half hour of genius. Ray Golden, Alan Simpson writing it, Bill Kerr, Sid James, Hattie Jacques, and Kenneth Williams supporting the lad himself, Tony Hancock, with some great lines when he's slagging off Hattie's cooking. What's how to go? At least my mother's gravy used to move about. Yours just sort of lies there and sets. So you get all that. So it's a brilliant half hour, and there's moments, there's seconds. Try and count them. There's sometimes 10, 12 seconds, I swear to you, of silence on radio, and it's hilarious. You're laughing at Hancock's pauses. So to listen to Hattie Jacques support probably for me the greatest radio comic we've ever had, Hancock. Let's have that for the free to enjoy. And the one to buy, as you mentioned it and you want to see someone, I'll dig it out later, is the Complete Sykes, which is a network DVD release. I'll find the cheapest link possible for it, but it's all 7 series of the colour Sykes BBC. So that's Eric Sykes and Hattie Jacques as identical twins. So that's a one to wallow in and enjoy for Hattie.
And one final question, just to ask you, while we're talking about Hancock and radio. Did she ever get the opportunity to write her own material?
She didn't really, no. I mean, I think she probably would have liked to have done that, but she was an actor first and foremost rather than a comedian, I suppose. So she was grateful to take the words written for her. So she worked with the best, as I say, those wonderful Ronald Chesney and Ronald Wolfe Educating Archie scripts and Eric Sykes and Talbot Rothwell on the Carry-Ons and Norman Hudis on those early Carry-Ons. But no, I don't. As far as I know, she didn't. I mean, I'm sure if she'd have lived long enough, she would have written her memoirs, which would have been a fascinating read, because she's a fascinating character. But I mean, I think the fact we're still talking about her now and she's still so beloved is quite an achievement. So on Mothering Sunday and on a day we're gonna. As always, as every day, we should thank the workers of the National Health Service. Hattie Jacques is the comedy mother and the comedy matron, isn't she? So she's that warm face for all those workers that we admire so much.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you.
Pleasure. Until next time. Thank you, Gemma.
Thank you, Robert.
Okay.